Why was Ukraine's president left standing behind the White House fence? This scene, splashed across global headlines, was far more than an awkward photo opportunity. It was a calculated diplomatic gesture. Volodymyr Zelensky, leader of a nation once hailed as a key U.S. ally, found himself addressing the world not from the stately halls of power, but from the sidewalk, peering through iron bars at the very building where major decisions about his country's fate are made. Instead of the traditional press room, Zelensky stood outside the White House perimeter, isolated and exposed, while American officials watched from a distance. There were no shared flags, no joint podiums, and no warm words of partnership. It was cold, unmistakably so, a scene that seemed to say, "You may visit, but do not presume to belong." What was Washington really signaling by keeping Ukraine's president literally outside the gates? What does this break with diplomatic tradition mean, not just for Zelensky, but for the future of Ukraine's ties with the West? If we mistake this moment for mere stagecraft, we risk missing the real story, a shift in how power and loyalty are measured on the world stage. Diplomatic theater is never accidental. Every detail, from location to who is allowed inside, tells us where alliances stand and where they may be headed. The question isn't what was said in official statements, but what was communicated in silence and in distance. Let's set the stage and unravel the hidden meaning behind every deliberate detail. Before we decode these symbolic gestures, let's look at how this frigid reception contrasts with past meetings and what that reveals about changing allegiances. In diplomacy, no detail is ever accidental. Every aspect of a diplomatic event, from the choice of venue and architecture to the seating arrangements and guest lists, serves as part of a silent but powerful language. Where a leader stands, who shares the table, whether the sun shines or the sky darkens, all these elements are purposefully orchestrated to communicate respect, trust, or distance. Consider the symbolism woven into every piece of protocol, the grandeur of a setting, the presence of national flags, even the choreography of where and how leaders greet the press. An invitation to dine together or a joint press conference in an official hall signals honor and alliance. An outdoor statement delivered behind iron railings, under gray skies, hints at exclusion or cool detachment. This is why the contrast with Volodymyr Zelensky's previous trips to Washington is so striking. Not long ago, he was welcomed with thunderous ovations in Congress, embraced by bipartisan lawmakers, and toasted at formal dinners. Press conferences took place in the heart of the White House, in rooms reserved for the highest levels of partnership. Now, picture Zelensky standing outside the famous White House fence, the park grass still wet from rain, with only journalists for company. The iconic iron barrier, once a simple piece of architecture, now becomes a powerful symbol, separating guest from host, outsider from insider. The absence of American officials at his side and the lack of ceremonial warmth speak volumes to those who understand this unique diplomatic language. To anyone unfamiliar with protocol, these choices might seem like minor logistics or quirks of scheduling. But in the world of statecraft, nothing is random. Each breach or upholding of tradition is a message about shifting power, changing priorities, or the erosion of trust. Failing to recognize these cues risks misreading not just this event, but the real dynamics of international alliances. How the West receives Ukraine is no longer simply about headlines or speeches, but about the very architecture and rituals of diplomacy itself. Now, let's examine the moment-by-moment breakdown of Zelensky's visit and how each breach of tradition sent a deliberate, chilling message. Let's look closely at how every step, photo, and setting during Zelensky's visit was carefully staged to send a message, one that could reshape the entire future of U.S.-Ukraine relations. This was no logistical accident. It was a revealing performance. When President Zelensky arrived in Washington, he was denied entry to the White House press room. Instead, he was forced to address the media outside, in the rain, across the fence, literally and symbolically on the wrong side of the divide. No American officials stood beside him at this impromptu outdoor briefing. There were no joint flags, no shared platform, just Zelensky, alone in front of reporters, with the infamous iron fence as a stark backdrop. There was no official press conference, no photo opportunity in the ornate halls of power, not even a shared meal. These breaks from diplomatic tradition were not random oversights. They sent an unmistakable message about respect, hierarchy, and the current temperature of relations. In diplomacy, protocol is never trivial. Every gesture, from the seating order to the press setup, signals status and trust between nations. Here, every missing element, every absence, spoke louder than words. Even the brevity of the meetings pointed to a lack of genuine interest or agenda from the American side. This was a far cry from the lengthy talks and celebrations seen in years past. If we take only the official statements at face value, we risk missing these underlying signals, the real power dynamics that shape alliances and futures. Diplomatic theater is not just for show, it is the language of international politics. But what are the implications of this new, colder approach, not only for Ukraine, but for the shifting landscape of global alliances? To understand what this means for Ukraine's future and the West's evolving priorities, we need to look beyond protocol and into the deeper strategic motives now driving these icy gestures. A new era of pragmatic, conditional alliances is dawning. The image from Lafayette Square, the Ukrainian president isolated outside the White House fence, answering questions under gray skies, has become a powerful symbol. This scene, with no welcoming flags or American officials present, will be remembered as the day Ukraine's status in the Western order was visibly downgraded. Such diplomatic theater is never accidental. When the choreography turns cold and distant, it signals more than just a mood shift. It predicts a change in policy. Support for Ukraine is no longer guaranteed. It is now conditional, transactional, and always secondary to American domestic priorities. For years, Ukraine built its political identity on dreams of equal partnership with the West. Now, those dreams face a harsh reality check. The message is clear. The era of easy assumptions and automatic support is over, replaced by a new logic where everything must be justified, negotiated, and earned. This public spectacle was not lost on the world. Media outlets across continents, and especially those invested in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, instantly recognized the event as a calculated rebuke. For allies and adversaries alike, the sight of a leader left standing outside sent an unmistakable message. The relationship has cooled, and expectations must be realigned. Ignoring these subtle but powerful signals is risky. Policymakers, analysts, and even ordinary citizens who fail to read the language of diplomatic stagecraft are likely to misjudge future developments. Understanding these cues is not just academic, it is essential for anyone concerned with the shifting architecture of global order. So, what does this new landscape mean for Ukraine's future choices? And how should viewers, policymakers, and citizens respond to such a sobering new reality? Next, we'll break down the practical strategies and mindsets Ukraine and its watchers must adopt to navigate this transformed relationship. Ignore the script, watch the stage. In diplomacy, what happens in the spotlight often matters less than what unfolds in the shadows and between the lines. The true story is told through gestures, settings, and subtle breaches of tradition that most people miss. When you analyze diplomatic events, always look for nonverbal cues and protocol breaches. Who stands where? Who is present or absent? When President Zelensky gave his press conference behind the iconic White House fence, outdoors, without the ceremonial flags or the presence of senior American officials, that scene was more revealing than any press release. It was not just a matter of bad weather or crowded schedules. It was a carefully staged message about distance and diminishing trust. Official rhetoric often masks reality. Leaders speak of partnership, but what room are they given? What doors stay closed? And what traditions are set aside? The absence of the usual courtesies and the choice to keep a guest outside the house say more about the state of the relationship than 1,000 words of diplomatic niceties. In this theater, the stagecraft itself is the clearest signal. we must also understand that alliances built on convenience are inherently fragile. When interests change, so do allegiances, sometimes overnight. Ukraine's experience with the West is a case in point. Yesterday's enthusiastic applause can become today's polite indifference and tomorrow's closed door. This reality demands a sober reassessment, both from Kyiv and from anyone watching global politics. For Ukraine, reading these signs means reconsidering how it approaches its Western partnerships. For all of us, it's a reminder to look past the surface and question the official story. If we fail to do this, we risk being misled by political theater, missing the real shifts in power that shape our world. Let's bring these lessons together and take a hard look at what the future holds, not just for Ukraine, but for anyone who wants to see through the illusions of international politics. Now let's turn our attention to the possible scenarios ahead. How could these signals reshape Ukraine's fate, and what should viewers like you watch for next? The next time you watch a world leader step up to a podium, pause and ask yourself, where are they standing, and why? The answers often lie not in what is said, but in the silent choreography of power, protocol, and public stagecraft. Behind every handshake, every velvet rope, and every podium placement, an unspoken narrative unfolds. If we take official statements at face value, we risk missing the deeper story shaping our world. Without a critical eye, we become mere spectators, vulnerable to the surface-level theater that powerful actors use to shape global perception. This is not just a matter of curiosity. It's about our ability to see through convenient myths and understand real shifts in alliances, influence, and trust. Diplomatic signals are not random. They are meticulously calculated, speaking volumes about who is in and who is being pushed out. A leader left outside the iron gates is more than just a scheduling note. It is a declaration of distance, a visible downgrade in status, and a coded warning to allies and rivals alike. In the age of 24/7 news and viral images, these details set the tone for international relationships. If we fail to notice them, we risk falling for hollow narratives, misreading the direction of world events, or worse, misunderstanding the risks and opportunities that affect security, reputation, and national interests. So, sharpen your gaze. Decode the scene. Let every camera angle, every step, every missing flag, and every closed door raise questions. The true language of diplomacy is often silent, but it never lies. Because in the end, it is not the press releases that move history. It's the stage upon which leaders are allowed, or not allowed, to stand.